Welcome to The Outsider's Voice. My name is Donald Barry. If you have stopped on this video, I appreciate it. Um, I would say Happy New Year. This is the first episode I'm recording after the new year, but I'm in Los Angeles County, and I happen to be a block south of what was the mandatory evacuation zone for the Eaton fire. Um, the property that I live in, I live with my parents. We're all okay, but I have a brother and sister who both lost homes in Altadena. I took a tour of the devastation last Wednesday, and it's just unimaginable. It's the sort of thing that you have to see with your own eyes, and even then, it really doesn't sink in. So we're all living on the other side of this new reality. Um, and I had had all my, podcasting YouTube equipment in the basement and, wasn't going to continue on. But um, I'm just finding that I need an outlet. So, what would it be? What would there be in it for you as a viewer, as a listener? um, just honest thoughts. Um, you know, Maybe you're like me and you feel like you're at the bottom of the internet, like, nobody's really saying anything new. Um, Maybe, I can bring some new thoughts. Maybe that would be the reason to stick around. So I am trying to find ways to conceptualize this for myself, have some purpose for it moving forward. And I guess this will just be a clearinghouse for my thoughts, warehouse, clearinghouse. So, how to get into that? Like, how to, open the can and let it all out. And I suppose it's just, by speaking. Um, Joe Rogan was famous for that, which was just hit record and let it go. If you're looking for what I would consider, kind of a fascinating experiment, you can go and search episode 4 of Joe Rogan. The YouTube algorithm just offered that up to me, several years ago. Um, this was when he had just signed the, big contract with Spotify. And it was really fascinating to see, Joe Rogan sitting in his desk chair at home, and it starts and it's just him trying to make the computer work. Um, and not that this is ever going to become the Rogan podcast, but just the interface that we have with this technology, what it could have been, back in the day, I think, roughly right around 2012 is when YouTube dropped the time limits on your ability to post content. I think it used to be limited to like 10-minute segments, and to just open up to the whole world to be able to uh post as much content as they want, while at the same time, roughly Twitter's taking off and they're doing the exact opposite, which is, keeping content to whatever it is, 160 characters or less. And so you have these two mediums to work in. One is absolutely long form content, and then the other is, the shortest, briefest content, that one could express in. Um, and so here I am in long form content, dealing with the fact from a personal perspective that when, I post these episodes, the very few people watch. There are some people that are close to me that do watch and have really liked what I've put up. And so I really appreciate that. Um, but it is, disheartening to feel like You're finally at this point in your life where, it's now or never. You got to share what you can share. And knowing that to some extent, that's a quixotic task. But there are, specific things, thoughts that I have that I can't stop myself from having. It's my part of my internal experience, just consistently. I can't shut it off. That I feel like would be helpful if other people had exposure to them. So that's what I'm trying to do here, on some fundamental level. So, what would be an example of that? So, my youngest brother, who came into our family as my foster brother, um, came out to visit. And unfortunately, poor guy, he had this trip planned for months, flew out to LA from um, Missouri and landed at 7:35 p.m. on Tuesday night. This would have been January 6th, just as the fires were popping off. Um, I was going to go pick him up at the Burbank airport. We're in Pasadena. I'm talking about Altadena, the Eaton fire. There's also the Palisades fire and then some other fires. And the winds were so bad that my mom was like, let's just call him a cab, you know, cut the, one half off of the trip and therefore one half off of the risk. Um, my brother, who lost his home in Altadena, was going to go pick him up with me. I text him, do you still want to go? And he texts back a little video of him following fire trucks on his way home from work saying, no, I'm going to keep an eye on this, this meaning this new fire. So my foster brother, my brother, shows up. I help him out of the cab. He's a big dude and he's got a completely shredded knee. It's in a brace. I'm helping him with his stuff and we're just trying not to get hit by falling branches. Get him inside the house. I'm up on my porch and I can see the fire in the distance, paired with these hurricane force winds. And I'm so pissed at myself that I didn't put together the obvious. And so I'm just taking a video of the fire that I can see. I can see the mountains from my front porch, and I'm grieving it for myself because this is I'll call it a sacred time of year for me. Um, I'm disabled. I have what I call clinical PTSD. The reason I call it clinical PTSD is because PTSD is so thrown around these days that it loses its meaning. Um, and so I went through a very profound trauma that was also very long and protracted that resulted in clinical PTSD, meaning I've been diagnosed by several professionals and, you know, people talk about PTSD. And the problem is not only do they minimize it, but they, I don't know what the word for is, they limited, limit it. Um, they may say, oh, I have PTSD from the holidays, or I have PTSD from doing my taxes, meaning when the holidays roll around, they have dread. When their taxes roll around, they have dread. And not only does that minimize PTSD, that makes it specific in a way that PTSD is not specific. When you have real PTSD, it's global. It affects everything that you do. Um, so forgive me, I lose my train of thought, and I just, if I'm going to continue to produce these things, I just got to speak into the microphone and, hope that it's helpful to somebody somewhere. And so my foster brother comes, yes. And so I'm watching this fire. It's racing up the mountain, and I'm thinking to myself, I've lost my sanctuary. For the last 8 winters, and this is just on the other side of the final nervous breakdown I had that made me step away from work and, you know, start the process of getting on disability. A huge resource for me has been living close to these mountains, which have now almost completely burned between this fire and two others. This time of year, I take my dog and we go on day trips. I'm, you know, being disabled doesn't mean having no ability. And one of the ways that that plays out for me is that when I'm feeling healthy, I have the wherewithal to get my dog in the car, pack a small backpack and, go out for the day. I can go out into the mountains. The mountains are healing, they're refreshing. I'm walking, I'm getting exercise, I'm enjoying the beauty of nature. And, if I can get back before dark, I'm okay. What is very difficult for me to do is what I would love to be able to do, right? If I were faking all this, it would be, to go on long trips, overnights, take a week, go up Northern California, do the redwoods, which I would love to do. But that's too much stress. I just can't put all that together, but I can get in and get out. And so I was watching these fires and just not putting two and two together. I mean, I have a video of it and I looked at it again just yesterday or the day before and realized, oh my God, I mean, there it is in the video. It's not just that there's a fire and that there are winds. There's this fire and you can see in the video it blowing the embers. And I just couldn't imagine. One of the things to understand if you're not in the fire zone, if you're watching this on TV, is that what is burned and how much of it is burned is what you would consider civilization. You wouldn't consider these when people build up into the mountains or they're in a small mountain community, there's some implicit understanding that that's part of the risk of living there, that if there's a forest fire, your house is likely to burn. But the devastation has come down into so much of what you would just consider normal living, um, that I think, none of us really saw it coming. And so I'm pissed at myself for not putting two and two together and then being able to alert my brother and sister who lost their homes that, hey, this could really hit you. Get everything that you can and get out. So my brother and sister have lost everything. Um, but in there, is this loss of this resource that I had that, you know, pays long-term dividends for me. It gets really hot out here in the summers now, and there's 3 months where it's just sucks to be outside. And having the mountains to look forward to and having the memories of the mountains from just, a year ago or 6 months ago, that resourcing is now gone. And so this is part of the problem I have. I have something that's called circumstantial speech, which is different from tangential speech. Tangential speech is a sign of severe psychosis. It's just tangent after tangent after tangent after tangent. Circumstantial speech is an attempt to establish the circumstances first before making the point. And so I launched into all this just to say, or to tell a story that includes my youngest brother, that I do have a thought process that I have to find a way to get out there. That's what I'm trying to attempt and have been trying to attempt on this channel. And so one of the things that me and my youngest brother have in common, and I hope that he's okay with me putting this out there on the internet, is our experience with drugs and alcohol. And at this point in life, both of us would love, I'll speak for myself, I would love for medical marijuana to be what it's supposed to be for people. And it just isn't. There was a 2 year window for me where I had some of my most beautiful experiences of my life with marijuana. And this is 90s, 93, 94, mostly in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I went to college. So we're talking about, just farm weed. You had ditch, you had weed, you had good weed, and then kind would come around every once in a while. And kind is what you can just walk into any shop now in California and get. But I used to smoke weed and have the most beautiful experiences. I was trying to explain it to a therapist once that I get high with other people, and it was clear I wasn't having the same experience as they were. And I was trying to explain it, and she just stopped me short and she just said, "You were tripping, right? I was having a trip while everybody else was just getting stoned." And that was how it was for me. I could just, a bowl of average weed, and and those were really beautiful experiences for me. And the reason I got into, drugs, I don't want to say so heavily, but for me, heavily, was for the spiritual, philosophical, artistic dimension of it, because they would show me things. And for the first 2 years, that was a pure experience. But then the neurosis started to creep in. And so the first half of it would be beautiful, but it would be paid for by this other half that was just all my neuroticism on steroids, until eventually it was just neuroticism, until eventually now my brain had learned to think about things that it probably wouldn't have thought about without, which is, I think, the hidden dimension, the shadow of marijuana that people don't want to talk about. We have legalized marijuana now, and is that a good thing? I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I don't think it should be illegal, but at the same time, I don't see it healing minds and souls and bodies the way people say. And I think there are a lot of people who, especially with the strength of the weed, are now damaging themselves psychologically in a way that may be irreparable. So on balance, maybe no, it's not a good idea. So I'm still trying to get to this thought. And so me and my brother were talking about this, and what I explained to him was my idea that long term, marijuana only works for people who are narcissists. People who are narcissists or people who are dumb. Why? Let's just get the dumb out of the way. Because people can get dumb when they're on marijuana. This is where it came up in the conversation. He was saying he didn't like to be around people who were high because they just got dumb, and then, right. And so, yes, I think maybe some people continue to smoke, for years and decades. They can continue to do it and derive some pleasure from it. Maybe there's just a level of, forgive me, but stupidity. And it just makes them dumb and makes TV funnier and makes, junk food taste better. But in my experience, the people who really could get high every day and function and then promoted, you know, weed and getting stoned as a lifestyle were narcissists. And here's where I'm getting to the point of the thought. Why does weed work for narcissists when it doesn't work for other people? And it's because a narcissist, a true narcissist, not just, we can all be narcissistic, but true narcissists, what defines a narcissist is that their internal voice is always on their side. We all talk to ourselves. We all have an inner narrator that's going all the time. And what defines a narcissist is that the language, the words that inner voice is saying to them is always on their side. Joe Rogan, um, smokes weed. Um, why does Joe Rogan still smoke weed in middle age and I don't? I would argue that if you could hear the conversation that he's hearing, the way that he's talking to himself, that voice is always telling him a story that supports and promotes him, that frames the world in a way that it's always on his side. And that's the true mark of a narcissist. Whereas for me, what happened was I couldn't stop criticizing myself. I couldn't stop thinking about all the things that I know about myself that are flawed. And that's not to say that narcissists don't have insecurities, but I bet you that if you could get a transcript of what they're saying to themselves, that voice is always framing things in a way that promotes them and lets them off the hook. That, you know, doesn't want to put those flaws front and center the way eventually that was the case for me. And so the thought is that the definition of a narcissist is someone whose inner voice is always on their side. And when I shared that with my youngest brother, he had an aha moment. He said, I've been studying, trying to, and that, maybe that's narcissistic of me that, I feel like I have this precise definition that perhaps, nobody's ever put it quite that way. But yeah, in my personal experience, those people who have been able to smoke weed long term and don't seem damaged by it are also those people who strike me as true narcissists. And I'll also add to that thought that for me, to be a true narcissist, you have something to be narcissistic about. There's a certain charisma to the narcissist. Growing up, my best friend was a true narcissist and a gaslighter. And I wish I had known what a narcissist was and what gaslighting is when I was young, because I would have understood much better what the game was and where I played in that game. But he had lots to be narcissistic about. He was very good looking, modeled and acted, professionally. Um, he was very quick-witted, very clever, very creative. He was an alpha male. He had a lot of courage. He knew um, how to manipulate other people. So there was an intelligence involved. He was very athletically gifted. And I'll mention here that he was Black. And that in my experience, the most elite narcissists that I've known personally have been Black, that there's a predisposition of the Black male towards not just narcissism, but being a narcissist. And I don't think you have to look any further than hip hop, 30, 40 years of hip hop at this point to that's elite narcissism. And there's a reason for it, right? Because who are the coolest among us? Black males, right? How many billions of dollars of shoes and clothes and music are sold every year to make people feel black, right? As opposed to how many, shoes are sold every year to make people feel white. And so it's difficult for me to, you know, find a way to share thoughts like that. I started out this channel calling myself a philosopher, and that got a little heavy, and I'm not, you know, really a philosopher, but I am a thinker. And, right around the age of 21, some people say that right around the age of 21, you set your course for life. And regardless of what you do, it's hard to get away from that. And so who I was around 21, I was in the writing program at my college. And basically what I was given as my mission was go out and experience life and write about it. Write what you know. So have something to know before you write. And I took that hook, line, and sinker, and it's stuck with me ever since. Um, and so that's, I guess, what I'm trying to do here is, write about what I know. And now my ability to concentrate and to put things into order is so damaged that all I can really do is, you know, turn on Zoom. And I think I forgot to hit record. We'll see if I hit record. I don't think I did. Um, and to talk about it. So maybe that's enough for today. Nope. I hit record. Great. Um, I'll just keep posting these and, you know, hopefully somebody somewhere on a long desert drive bumps into this and they get some peace. Maybe, my definition of what a narcissist is helps them see that in themselves and others. And, there's some gain in that for them.